Grand Rising, and welcome to show number 11 on Conversation on Art. A show, the aim was to bring about friends, artists, to create in different kinds of media and hopefully bring us all together so we can learn and maybe inspire each other. Let me introduce my first guest, Annie, textile artist and painter. Grand Rising, Annie.
Grand Rising, everybody. Thank you for having me today. Grand Rising.
Joining us today from New York, poet, filmmaker, newscaster, podcaster, Ade. Grand Rising, Ade.
Grand Rising, everyone. Good to be here.
And today's guest joining us from Chicago is poet, photographer, works in performance art, Sierra. Grand Rising, Sierra.
What's up in Grand Rising?
Great. Okay, well, I got to know Sierra through her posts, and I loved her imagery and poetry and her use of exploration into history and the way her use of the Black body and the imagery in her words. So Sierra, could you tell us about what you're working on right now?
What am I working on right now? It's so interesting because I don't know if I've ever kind of set things out with this is the thing that I want to work around. I think that how I initially began posting on Facebook, and it was a medium before Facebook, many years ago called Yahoo 360. It's a very dark space and you had to learn a little bit about code and be able to kind of put your words on there and then add an image if you can. And I liked that dark space because it was really pretty much just me and source. And it was me bouncing ideas that was going on in my head, in my world, in my life, conflicts, struggles. And I was able to post it and ramble around with it. And, it was just this space that was just me. And then one person came, then two people came, then three people came, and they began to interact with the work. But I never created work for someone to look at. This was always an intimate conversation between me and source itself. And that what people are doing is they're having experience with looking at me have that intimate relationship, and they're onlooking, they're onlookers. And I kind of kept it that way throughout the years because when you began to target who you think is watching or your audience, you kind of come out of some other zone. And I don't want to ever come out of that space. I don't I don't know why I don't really like the word authentic, but I think that it keeps the authenticity. I don't know how to say it, the word, but it keeps it authentic, and it allows me to not worry about who's gazing or who's judging it or who's admiring it even, I can stay blunt or tender or, all of these things is still malleable and available to me if I know that I'm only speaking directly to source, And so many people have come throughout the years who speak about it or appreciate it. I get a lot of messages on the back end of Facebook. A lot of even seniors, that's in their 80s, and they are like, I appreciate your work. And because people still look at it as like, work. And I guess it could be, but this is really my meditation. It's something that I have to give to myself and for myself. And then I can see through the documentation of it how far along I've come, or no space in between. Sometimes I'm struggling with some of the same issues, and it's something kind of beautiful about that, though. I get a chance to look at the entire journey for what it is, with no judgments and no magnifying glass to it. So it can be incredibly vulnerable, but I wouldn't want it any other way. Yeah.
Sierra, you talk about, when we've spoken, how your art is infused by your spirit, and you use the term source quite a lot. Could you explain what you mean when your work comes through source?
So when I say source, it's really an internal thing. It's not a memory, it's just a knowing. When I came to this plane of existence, I have memories before this plane of existence. One of the biggest ones is that I've always sat in the center of the universe, period. And I don't know if I had the term universe as a word, but it's just like in this big, gigantic space of nothingness that's dark but comfortable, you know? And I lean almost like the image that's on my Facebook page. That's why I like that image, is because when I say I sit in the center of the universe, it's kind of like I'm sitting like that. And I've always been there forever. And I sent myself into this space um, with only two goals. And one of the goals was to observe what I've already created. And it's already been in perpetual motion. And the other was to cleanse the blood. So when I hit the ground running, coming into this plane of existence, those two things were paramount. The only other third thing was that I was sitting in the center of the universe. That's the only knowing that I have. And so everything else has now been a collective adding on from society, family members, and all of that stuff. And I can't tend to identify with any of those things. You know what I'm saying? So I just let them give me a name, which is Sierra, and I let them give me whatever it is that they're giving me. You know what I mean? But I don't attach myself to it. The only thing that I feel connected really to is source, which is always been here and had an interest of observing and to not judge it, because I know that I'm the one that perpetuated that thing already. So whoever, quote unquote, I am. Now, I'm just extremely honest with this, right? Because some can say, oh, that's narcissism, or it's this, or it's that. But that's the best knowing that I have. That's the best way that I can explain it. And so when I'm speaking about source, I'm speaking back to myself. But I'm also speaking to that I see source in all beings, right? So when I meet someone, I hear all of the narratives that they say that they are. Oh, I'm female, and I live here, and my family is this, and that just seems like it's just things that's added on top of you've always been, you always will be, and I just see directly into the center of that. And but if we want to play with the notions of these narratives, that's okay too. You know what I'm saying? But I know that I'm meeting source. And because of that, there's a immediate tenderness and an immediate appreciation. Thank you for allowing me to be able to be in your presence once more. You know what I mean? And what are we going to work on today? And I approach all beings in that way. So I'm not the only source. Everybody is source. I'm the only one that I remember being in the center of that darkness and that space. But when I meet other beings, when you speak to them long enough, that shared space become all one space. You know what I mean? It becomes like, oh, I can place them. And it's almost like cosmically, like it's a spatial location thing. And I don't know why I have this, but I've always had it too, where it'll give me certain codes or like longitude and latitude. And then I'll look up what that longitude and latitude is, you know, but it'll give me placements and understandings of beings being placed not just on this earth plane, but where it attaches to, connected to cosmically. So your guess is as good as mine. I don't know why I get it, how I get it. I just get it. I just have it. And I am exploring it still and appreciating it more than anything. you know. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, yeah. So before we started, you just mentioned performance art. So can you tell us a little bit about the mediums that you use to express yourself?
Hmm. So it was mostly just my body, spatial location, and the idea of someone who's around, whether they're an onlooker, whether they're quote unquote audience. And I would always ask source, what do you want me to create? What is the best thing that can be created in this moment? How much light should be utilized to spotlight this thing? What should I say? How should I say it? None of the information comes from me. There is no me. And as much as I can stay in that line of thought, because it removes ego. And then it tells me. And so it was very challenging to talk about the work because a lot of the people that was surrounding me didn't believe in spirit or quote unquote, I don't really use the term God often, but they don't really have a deep understanding about source, or they would challenge it. And often you couldn't really talk about your work anyway. Your work had to showcase for itself. So people would be incredibly moved, and I would have to give you a couple of examples of some of the work that was done. And it built on top of each other, right? So being in a space where the professor himself, as I began to learn in school, the professor himself was going through challenges. And I felt like there was a lack of compassion to what he was going through. And so I centered, well, source, or I centered what I was going to do around the professor himself. And so he was the subject. And that lack of compassion came from people putting themselves in a position of, I'm student, you're professor, you're not supposed to be having an emotional breakdown right now. So get it together and teach me something, you know? And I shattered all of those theories, those barriers, because when I grew up, I had to shatter a lot of those barriers about what a family is, what is a teacher, what is, any of these things. So when I was in a space with this person who just needed compassion and care and needed to be seen, because he couldn't really teach effectively, then he began to teach really effectively, but I did a lot of work surrounding him, and I want to respect that moment, because it's really about the moment. You're really in it. And so some of the things, well, I'll give you one example. Yes, I think I can give this example. The professor himself, I decided to turn the light off in the middle of us talking about whatever we were talking about, because timing is important. It wasn't something that was incredibly insightful and incredibly important. So I wasn't taking the shine off of someone else. And when I turned the light off, right prior to me turning the light off, I had wrote on a sheet of paper, when you receive this paper, step outside, but don't go far. So when I had the sheet of paper, I literally just passed it to the next person that was next to me. They looked at the paper, they looked back at me, they passed the paper to the next person, because I kind of pointed my eyes to the next person. They got up, they left. So the professor's looking like, what's going on? Now, mind you, in this classroom, there is no chairs, there's no stuff. It's just us. We're sitting in our own particular chair. So there's chairs that we're sitting in, and he's sitting in the center of the space. So after the last person received the piece of paper, the professor wanted the paper to see, why is everyone leaving my class? So then I looked at the person and I said nothing, but then they came and brought the paper to me. When they brought the paper to me and the last person was out of the door and they closed the door, I turned the light off, and then I went to the professor and I bent down on my knees and I took his shoelace out of his shoe and I placed it carefully on the floor. And I took the other shoelace, and as much time as was needed to unravel the shoelace, you didn't speed it up, you didn't slow it down, just keep a normal pace. And then I took one shoe off, then another shoe off, then a sock off, then the next sock off, so on and so forth, to the point where all of the clothing is off and is laid on the floor. And then I picked his foot up and traveled his foot to see if there was any natural scars. And if there was, how did you get this? Do you remember getting this? Do you remember your experience? And I circulated the entire body that way, behind the ears, on the forearm. And, you know, at first he was just shocked. He is diehard, so his work is important to him, and so he didn't stop the process, but I could feel his heart beating through his chest, through mine. So, but he kept calm. And so at first he wasn't really answering. And then he began to answer. I think I was 6, you know? And then his pace began to slow down, and he began to give more detail. And then it sped back up. Then it slowed down. Then it sped up until I hit every area. And then I began to gather his items and to go outside. And he said, hold on. Can I please just have my boxers? So I gave him his boxers. And he said, can you give me my shirt? And I said, I'm sorry, I can't give you that. And he was like, well, can I have my pants? And I was like, no, I can't give you that. And I went outside, closed the door behind me, and I passed each item, one shoelace to one person, the belt to another person, one boot to one person. And then when everyone had an item, we all came back inside, and I sat down, and I think I had his shirt. And then I passed him his shirt, and he placed it back on. Then the person who had one of the socks came and put one of the socks on, and so on and so forth. And of course, they were shocked and curious. One guy, he had the belt, I believe. He got angry and threw it across the room and left out the room. And so then I went over and I picked up the belt, and I attempted to put it on, but I think a woman's belt and a man's belt, they put it on differently. So then he took it out and put it on the right way. And then the last person put the hat on, I believe, because he had a jacket and another shirt and all of these things. And so once he was completely dressed, he was so moved by it that he couldn't really communicate. And he said that we're going to take a 20-minute break, and that we're going to come back to discuss after. So I think that 20-minute turned into 40 minutes. And then the nature of how we discuss and critique is the students discuss amongst, about what they feel. Because most of this is about what's private and what's personal, And so some of them was angry at the fact that they didn't know more information. Some of them was angry at the fact that they were putting on their professor's clothing. Some of them was angry at the fact that I came out with their professor's clothing. So it was mostly surrounded about, here's these structural, barriers that we've created in society, and that you've crossed them. And we feel the way about it. And we also feel the way about this private versus personal space. And we feel the way about that. And so I can't say anything. And so this discussion went on for like 2.5, 3 hours, I think. And then I was finally able to discuss. And I don't think I said very much, because every time someone would bring up a thing, and it may take 40 minutes, then another person would counter it. And they'll say, well, why is it this way? You know? And they pretty much had resolved it out themselves. But it was mainly because this human being who is obviously struggling, you know, he needed help. How do we help him? Right? And he's struggling in the classroom. So not just outside of this space. So it must be addressed. And did I address it the best way possible? It was the best way that I knew to do it, which is to really strip down to what are we, who are we, and then tenderly piece it back together again, and to acknowledge him. So that was one of the pieces that I did, and I did many of them. And yeah, so that's a little bit about the performance art that I did. The performance artwork that I think I even still do, even when I'm surrounded with words and how I use my words and the subject matters. It's still a meditative process. This is between me and source, but these are the things the places that I work with and the work itself.
Could you tell us a bit about your poetry and how do you start? Is it something that you begin in a meditation? Are you just inspired in certain moments by things or what you see?
I've been writing since I was maybe around 17. And I just kind of hold on to all of these writings. And then I transfer them from paper to computer because then I can be able to, get to them faster. And it's just a continuation. So some of the work is 20, 30 years old or 20 years old, 25 years old. And I would add to it, edit it, change it, and not really interested in like making it more palatable, but making it more honest and editing. I'm really big about editing to not have anything there that's absolutely unnecessary for it to be able to function well. And then when I do that, I still may not touch that work for 10 years unless I find the perfect imagery that can speak of what it is that I was attempting to get across. But what I'm attempting to get across is always surrounding around social justice or some sort of thing that sits right in my gut, and I can't, there's this fire there, and I'm wondering why is not anyone else pissed off about this issue, or there should be more tenderness here, there should be a little bit more light shown here, or there's too much light, or whatever it is. So when I wake up in the morning, I will receive some sort of answer to what my issue was the night prior to, if there was an issue at all, or some sort of understanding, and then I'll begin to write it out. Sometimes it's in between my dream, and I just have to get it out. But as soon as I wake up, I typically begin to write. And then 9 times out of 10, I'll wind up posting what it is that I'm thinking of in that moment. But then if it's added to something that I've already previously worked out, or if it refines it, then I'll go to that work, and it may be an older piece. And then I'll source an image. I have so many images, thousands and thousands of other people's images. A lot of the images that you're seeing is other people's work. And I'll place the work to that image that could best describe what I'm feeling. And I can't say it's an easier process now, but it's a more refined process now. I can kind of touch on it faster because I've been looking at these images for years now. I've been working with the words for years now. There's a feeling that I get when I hear someone describes it as poetry, because I don't see it. It doesn't come out of me in the form of the idea of poetry. But I think that throughout the years, the word poetry has gotten a bad rap, but I just call it the work. Um, and sometimes it's not even mine. And really, especially being on this platform of Facebook and other social media sites, it doesn't belong to you anymore. Once it comes out, it probably never belonged to me ever anyway, it's just being refined through me. But it's typically an issue that everyone is, a lot of people are going through, and either they have lacked the words or the ability or the time to look at it in detail, and then to strip everything else back except for just that feeling. A lot of times what I'm looking is that it's not even a word, it's an energy field. And the more that I can take off of it, the more it can reveal itself. Like I see images everywhere all the time. You know how you see images inside the clouds? And you take your finger, if someone can't quite see the giraffe or the elephant, and you take their finger and you can trace what's there. And to me, I see those things all the time. It's everywhere. And then I'll just take a person's finger and we'll trace out what's already in existence. So it used to be very difficult for me to accept the word as a poet or an artist, because I'm really just tracing out or refining what I already see. Some things is unique to my experience, but most of it, I don't know if I really could say that it is. And it's just one of the ways that I approach the writing, but mostly how I approach it. There's other few things that's there, but where it can be the least amount of ego involved, that's how I typically approach it. Sometimes, and I know that there's ego involved, and how I post or write something, and those things don't really always keep the amount of time. I may pull that off, on occasion. What I do now recently is I'll write, but I'll make it private. Because a lot of people want to interact with your work, and they should, I'm not used to that yet. So I just began to do what I used to do, which was just write. And this is just between me and source anyway. So I won't make it public. And then over time, if I choose to, I might. There's a lot of work that you've never seen and no one has ever seen. And I'll add an image to it even, because then it's just more intimate, and I can keep that relationship honest and pure, Yeah, I think I've talked enough.
Yeah. So what happens, is it that you kind of find an energetic connection between an image that you may have with the words, and it's something that you feel?
Yes, because with the imagery, like I've done photography in the past, and I began one of my first memories of other than knowing that I was source and here's my mission. One of the first other images that I remember or seeing myself do was sitting at a table. There was an adult-sized table, full wood, heavy table, but next to it, it was a small-sized table, and we had coloring books and crayons. And I was seeing through myself, right? Because you don't really have a sense of self yet as a small child. And I was coloring and drawing. So I've always been expressive in that way. And so imagery is very important to me. I also used to stand in front of images when I was little, a painting, and I'll stare at it for 2 hours straight. And over time, what looks to be a flat surface thing, it turns into little dots, but blue dots. And then you can begin to move it and shift it, right? So nothing is really permanent. Nothing has this, material isn't a solid thing. It can be shifted. And that deep meditation that I used to do when I was a little girl, I was able to carry that with me as I became an adult. And it was easier to be able to move and shift that matter now. But when I was little, it was just like, oh, this is just what happens, and I just assumed that everybody else could do it and was seeing what I was seeing. There wasn't a lot of language attached to it. So images has like a whole life within themselves, right? And it can be moved around, but it's touching on something that's already a real thing, you know? It's expressing this thing that's already there. And I like this thing that's already there, right? And the words, the energy, again, is already there. You know, you're just putting layers of words on top of trying to express what's already there. So I just look to find an image that fits with the words, that does the same thing. You know, both of these things is here already. But who's able to express it? The tone might be a little bit more flat. It may have less vibrancy. Some of the more recent work. I've even worked with other people's words, and I was able to find the exact image that I thought that evoked. You know, it just comes to life. Like I love the idea of at some point, being able to being a director, because that's how I see my dreams. I remember every single detail when I dream, to the point where I know the pattern that's on the shirt sleeve or the button of what that person's wearing. I mean, every single detail, fabrics and everything. So when I'm waking up in this life, you know, it's just as intense, but now I have to work with the material that's already in front of me, you know? So yeah, I'll wait forever till that image is perfect to whatever that writing is. And it's just something that you be patient with, and it's ingredients. You know, you don't want to be greedy, you don't want to be quick with it, you know. You take the time, and it's healing to my soul. I'm glad that it's healing to others, but it's healing to me. And so whatever is that medicine, and it's going to take time to receive it. Some things is instant, but most of the time it isn't. You wait for it. You wait for it to kind of reveal itself. And when it does, and the word isn't submit, but you listen and you become obedient to it. You know, you've become obedient to source, and then stay in that space. Whatever, if I'm writing, if I'm doing photography, if I'm doing whatever I'm doing. So that's it.
Could you tell us about your dreams and traveling within them, and the messages that sometimes you receive or you may receive?
And the dreams, it's a lot of times they're not dreams at all. Um, it's just the ability to slow the brain down at a slow enough pace in order to release the physical body and allow the astral body, the cosmic body, to blend back in. I guess you could say, quote unquote, to the nothingness. Because then you can travel anywhere, right? It used to be when I was little, there was portals, and that I would dream things, and I would have deja vu, and it would take maybe 15 years in order for it to reveal itself. Because in my dream, I would say, oh, I don't know these people. I don't remember these voices. I don't know this space that I'm transported to. So that won't happen. And it'd take years. And then it will always happen. And to the point I could no longer say it. It was gonna happen because it always did. And then it used to take 15 years, 10 years, 7 years, 5 years, 2 years. Then it started happening within a year, within 11 months, 7 months, 5 months, 2 months. I remember the day, this was about 3 or 4 years ago. I was driving and I seen something or thought of something, and within 2 hours of it, it was right in front of me. And it was a very important moment for me, because it was just like, wow, this thing is speeding up so quickly. And then it began to go this opposite way with time, right? It began to be where I would stand in front of a tree, or even the image of a tree, and it would be an oak tree in front of me and a pine tree. And it would be a flood of information of when I planted the oak tree and what the medicinal purpose is, or the purpose of it, that was different than the pine tree, because I could have just created all pine trees. You know what I'm saying? But this was important because it produces this. So now I just get that information, and it's mostly now with nature, right? It's like I can hear it, I could see it, I could feel it. It's so, I always could have a connection with nature before, but now it's like it's a whole body in front of me, like a being like you can almost talk to, you know what I mean? And just communicate directly with it, and it communicates back with you, you know? Also too, when I meet people, it's almost as if all of this has already happened, and so we're back in time right now in this moment. All of this has already happened, but you can jump to where it already happened at, and there's a whole continuum. I can jump 20 years in front of whatever had already happened. I can go all the way to the beginning of the spectrum, right? But I've always been able to do a lot of these things, even as a small child, but it was just because I had nothing to put a foundation to it. There was really no other purpose than entertainment. And because of that, I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want to just entertain myself. And in the dreams, making to the point where it's no longer a dream, it's just a reality. I still didn't want to just do things because I can do it, especially when it's relating to other people, being able to go in and out of forms, their form, being able to hear more of their thoughts than the ones that they've invited you to hear, being able to just do superimpose, just a lot of stuff. And all of it is just material. But I honor the material. I honor the being. So it's not really a dream. I don't really believe in dream states and all of that. I think it's a reality. And then we just allow ourselves the ability to do it because there's not a lot of judgment there. And there's not a lot of I don't know what the word would be, but we don't have to close ourselves off to it. We can suspend ourselves. Some things come to me in the form of like statements. And Source said to me about, I was going to say 4 years ago, but I think it's been more than 4 years. It may be closer to, it was around 2014. It said, suspend yourself in my abundance. And then my mind went to float in it, and it said, no, suspend yourself. And what I received from that is the same image of being inside a space. And when you're inside of just, it's only space that's there, this dark space, when you're thinking about, say, the cosmos, you know, there's a few planets here and there, but mostly in between them all is an incredible amount of space. And you can fall deep like an anchor, or you could suspend yourself, or you could float, right? But it says suspend yourself in my abundance, you know? And so there's an abundance amount of the possibilities that could be created, but the things that has already been created, it's not flat. It still can be utilized very well. It's still very malleable, and it can be transferred. So yeah, I don't know if I believe in the whole concept of dream work, or if there is dreams, there's definitely a lot of space in between of you know, it's really permission, which you're able to give yourself permission to do in a quote unquote unconscious state when we're really never unconscious, and versus what you've given yourself permission to do in a woke state. And I think I've learned how to give myself permission to do those same things in my woke state than I did in my dream state. So
Is that something that took a while to come to give yourself permission?
yeah, I think I've always been giving myself permission here and there. When I was little, I've given myself full permission. but because I thought everybody else was giving themselves permission too. And then I got older and I realized, oh, we're not having the same reality. Most times when I'm talking to people, they're like, oh, I used to think like that, or I used to feel like that. And that was a very real thing for me. But I stopped doing it around 7 or 8. And that's when they began to be socialized. They're in school. They're told how to think, what to think, what's real, what's not. I was separated from my family when I was 7. So I think that that timing that I was supposed to be socialized out of that, I just wasn't, you know what I mean? So I was able to carry that with me throughout life. And so I always given myself permission, but I think I began to attempt to superimpose upon myself. Like someone recently said, you know, they wanted me to be more grounded. And, you know, I've heard it before, and like maybe 3 times in my life. And it's always coming from a male. And so I'm looking for this invisible ground that they're talking about, you know, because this ground that we say that we're on. I remember getting an app years back, and it was able to place where the stars were. And it showed me that Uranus was underneath me, and I was laying down at the time on my bed. And it blew my mind because I think I was in this very top-heavy point of existence, you know? And I couldn't imagine Uranus being beneath my feet, you know? And I was like, okay, this feels so, it feels off balance, but it feels also very much the way you need to, you know? Something opened up inside of me that I think was always there, but it gave the permission again, you know? Because I didn't think that my mind could be blown again. When I was little, my mind was blown all the time, you know? This is one of the first times that my mind was blown. And I think I began to give myself permission again in that moment. But it's been a continuum. Like I said, my dreams, I used to call it deja vu, and it would happen 15 years and 12 years. So I think all along, that's why I said a couple years back when I seen that it was things was happening in front of me. 2 hours after thinking about it, it would be in front of me. I think that the permission has been, it's kind of going in the other way now. It's like, it's no longer even a matter of permission. It's just that it's happening. And it's always happening. And I was creating the barrier. I was creating the burden. So I don't allow others to create those barriers for me. And I don't allow myself to create those barriers for me. But it takes time, you know, because some things you're like, I didn't even know there was a barrier there, you know? Also, too, you're connected to, you know, when this last person said that to me about the groundedness, and then I seen that they were writing about how they spoke about women and how they spoke about just humanity overall. It seemed to lack a lot of humanity and a lot of compassion, deep compassion about women. And I was thinking, is this the ground that you want me to secure myself to? You know? So I think I have a deep sense of moral order and integrity within myself. And that's the ground that I move upon, you know? But I don't have to have one to calling a thing and creating more narratives, because that's just stuff and it's to make people feel good and it's ego, you know what I mean? So that moral center is ground enough for me. And everything around it is a construction, whether it's a construction that's made from society, whether it's a construction that's made for even yourself, but also always know that you are the one that's creating the material for it. And it doesn't belong to anyone. And it can be moved and shifted at will.
What I've loved looking at as well is the pictures of ancient Egypt. The color, the history. And you and I recently had a discussion on the Medunetta Can you talk about that and how you began to use as imagery in your work?
Yes. We were talking about dreams. And I remember having a dream, because a lot of times when I get information from source, I don't want it. So I say it's something about like learning how to submit and being obedient, because it'll give me some information and it's like, share this with this person. And I'm like, oh no, I don't think I am. And it's just like, oh no, but you will.
Mm.
So I had a dream where I was inside of one of the pyramids. I don't know if it was Pyramid of Giza or what, but it was some sort of pyramid. And it had placed me in Kemet. And there was a body on a table. I was very familiar with the look of the body and who it was. And their eyes was closed, but they wasn't dead, you know? So I guess my concept of this person being laying down and they were going through funeral processions, I imagined immediately that, oh, this is a funeral procession. But they wasn't dead. So that was a little bit of it wasn't a surprise to me in the dream, but it was a surprise to me in the, you know, me doing the work, but I'm also the one that's dreaming it. And I'm also the person I'm also all of the characters in the dream that I do know. That's why I feel like in this lifetime it's the same thing. But so when I was cleaning the body, it first cleaned it with water, then it cleaned it with smoke, and then that was it. And then it wrapped it with some white garments on this person's being, and it was preparing them for the realm that I guess in my mind, I was like, oh, this is for, they're dying and they're going to go to the next stage. But I think all of the stages happen consecutively here. You know what I mean? So, but I wasn't thinking about it that deeply. I was just in the process of, right? And I called a friend of mine and I said, hey, this person that I know, this is the dream that I had. I was cleaning their body, and I was cleaning it with water and smoke, and then I dressed them in white garb. There was two other beings in the space, I don't know who they was. It didn't give me clarity about them. I have a form in mind, and I feel like if I wanted to go deeper into seeing the detail of it, I could, but I knew who was on the table for sure, and I knew I was the one cleaning them. So I was asking her, this is a very weird thing, like, should I tell them? Because I know how sources worked with me throughout the years. Like, and then I was like, but that's an odd thing. She was like, no, I probably wouldn't tell them either, because she connected it to the same way that I connected it with, that this is a funeral procession. They're going to think that they're going to die, Well, the next night, it didn't even wait a year, 2 years, 5 years. It didn't wait 3 days. The next night I had the same dream. But this time it was more detail. So I was cleaning their body with the water, and it was a water that almost floated. It wasn't the water that we understand water to be, And then I cleaned it with smoke, but I didn't have a tool or anything. I just had my hand over them and the smoke was there. But it can go into certain crevices that the water can't. And it was on top of it. Again, it wasn't touching the body fully. It was like above the body. And then, but this night I put oil on them. And I didn't put oil the night before, And then I wrapped them in the cloth. And then it showed me how they were going to be moving about, because it wasn't stiff. The white garb wasn't like the mummies or anything like that. This white garb was almost like clothing. So they could still have the function of their limbs. And it gave a little bit more information, and it's not something that I could even, sometimes the information, it doesn't have English attached to it, and you want to place it with something, but I allow that space to still be in its hazy state, because the understanding is clear, translating it not so much. And so there's a whole life there. That space is still happening. It didn't go away, but it's it's pausing itself for me to look at it briefly while also being here at the same time. And this is what I understand about the whole superimposition. When I do speak to people who are heavily academic and things like that, you have to speak to them in terms that they understand, right? So all of these moments are all simultaneously happening. And it's almost like having a magnifying glass versus a telescope versus a microscope. And which one do you want to look in this particular moment? And you can be in both places at the same time, but you got to be okay with what that feels like. And you can't have fear of going into a small space. Like I can go into the blood and travel through the blood, right? But if you're afraid that you'll never be able to come back and be in this particular space, then that fear will stop you or paralyze you or whatever. So it's a lot of being okay. So when that second night happened and I called my friend, I was like, yeah, source is telling me that I got to tell them, like, I can't hold on to this. I want to do what I want to do and not share. And it made me do it. And when I did, the first words that came out of his mouth is like, I'm not going to die. You're not going to kill me. But he smiled when he said it. And then the smile let me know that there was more. But that was the immediate first reaction. And so we started speaking about it. And now me and this person has developed a friendship over the last 7 years. And there's more to it, you know, but you can't. So it gives me information about people, and it gives me information about people a lot of times. And it'd be 240 years in advance of them and generations in front of them. Like it'll give me like, oh, it's going to take this person 80 lifetimes to get to a place of harmony. How do you tell a person that? You know what I'm saying? And what levels of ego they would have to diminish and you would have to diminish within yourself to make sure you got the message right. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of times I'm mostly holding my tongue and I'm always receiving a lot of information and mostly I'm turning the volume down. It's like a radio receiver. I can hear a lot, but I just turn all of the stations down. And know where it's coming from. Oh, is this coming from something inside of myself? Because all of it always is. And it's magnifying through this other being or whatever. But now I'm more okay with it. I'm able to kind of handle all of what's happening and why it's happening. I still don't know all the way why, you know, but there's joy. But when it comes to other people, I'll ask them before saying the words, I'll ask their spirit, is it okay to share with them? And are they ready to receive? And depending on their response, I may say nothing at all, you know, or I may say a tiny piece. And I don't think that I can receive it at all without them already giving me an invitation. But there's layers to this physical being, this physical body, right? And the forgetfulness, right, of who we are and what we are. So I let the speed of that happen for them in the time that's ready for them. Because it's not something that I don't get satisfaction or fulfillment, you know. It's just material. I mean, it's great if it does help them. It's okay if it doesn't. You know what I mean? We'll always still be okay. You know, it may take a little bit more time in life for others or whatever. I don't, hold this thing to myself. It's I got to be the one to say it. You know, I got to be the one to show it or share it. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
Ron, I'm just going to take a quick bathroom break.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I don't want to disrupt the recording, so you could keep talking, and I'll be right back.
Let's go ahead. Yes.
Okay.
Sierra, is it like sometimes, like a radio, you've got lots of channels playing on different frequencies, but you're able to tune in on particular frequencies?
Absolutely, that's exactly the way that it is, and it's in an audible way, but also very much visually too, and spatial location. You know, I don't know why it gives me spatial locations. You know, a lot of times I'm just open to it though. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm open to getting a piece of information about it, and then in 2 years getting a little bit more. It gave me information when I was 18 about Seattle. And I didn't know why it was telling me to go to Seattle. You know what I mean? It was just giving me coordinates. And then it gave me coordinates for Ecuador. Then it gave me coordinates for San Diego. But when I started to look it up, I'm like, well, what's the things that they have in common? And I find that a lot of these places is where all 4 branches of the military is. So I just thought that was really odd, you know? It gave me coordinates for other places and stuff too. Like when I meet someone, it's like, oh, your significant other, you're gonna find them in Zambia or South Africa. You know what I mean? But it'd be a random person, but it'd be this very important thing, you know? I used to drive Uber. Actually, I just began driving again. And the person would get in a car and you can't really look at them, you know what I mean? But you get a sense of smell, their body chemistry, what perfumes or colognes they use. If they use none at all, you can still sense in like animals, like what the chemistry of the body is, the health of the body. The sound of their voice, I can be able to almost place anyone around the world where they are by the sound of their voice. Then it'll tell me certain things like, you don't like cherries, but you have a dress that has cherries on them. Like just random stuff. So in my mind, I'd be like, be quiet. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to tell them this. But then you'd be like, but you are going to tell them this. And so when I do, she's like, I don't like cherries, but I do have a dress that has cherries on it. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, if this thing is that malleable, imagine like, can we get some world peace up in here? Like, I don't know. It's like, it's so tender, you know? We're very sensitive. You know, there's so many layers that we can't see or science hasn't placed and constructed and wrote a couple books about and taking their own acknowledgement or whatever. You know what I mean? The process of what they say. Now we can call this thing a thing, right? We're just so tender and we're able to receive so much from them, you know, from each other. I used to want to have a reasoning, like, so we can get this thing done of like creating a better world. But I think maybe each interaction, as small and minute as it is, as long as it's met with tenderness, and some of it isn't as pleasant, but the attempt is still very tender, you know? Then maybe that's the overall answer, that you don't have to kind of get together and have this ongoing mission. You know what I mean? But yeah, it just gives me information. And it told me with this guy, one guy, he came in and I can tell that he was in excruciating pain. His face didn't show it, but I could tell. And it just told me, you know, and I fight with myself before saying this, like, who am I to say this to this person? And is this coming from some kind of place of ego? Is this a projection? Because I'm never interested in like putting my own stuff and projecting it on someone else, you know? But everything was right in alignment with what I said. And he was like, you're right about this, 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 and this. And he said, and then I met him again, you know, and we spoke again. And that doesn't happen often, you know, that you as a driver get the same passenger twice. Matter of fact, they used to create it in their algorithm that would never happen. But when it started to happen, it was just like, okay, there was more to be said. And, you know, he had deep emotion because he was saying that, you know, he had a light spirit, but he was held down with a lot of anger, and that it came from childhood. It came from a place where before he even formed language, and it was an anger about the person who was supposed to take care of him and be tender to him, like a mother thing, a nurturing thing. He didn't get the nurturing that was necessary, and that he was going to need to be touched for the next 2 years, massaged with 3 things. It told me 2 of those items, but the other one, it didn't give me it gave me an imagery of it in a place on the earth where it's at, that they can receive it. It's in Mexico somewhere, but I'm not familiar with it, you know? And that it's going to have to be like some sort of salve. So it's 3 different things. And for 2 years, that person's going to things that's really inexpensive, actually. If he had a significant other, I said, if you have a significant other who can rub this on your body for 2 years, you're going to require that. Because it's really the lack of touch throughout the amount of years that has added up for so many years that he needs to get that back into his system. You know, because we have stages and things like that, and we can't outgrow, you know, certain stages. We have to have that acknowledgement within in that space. So yeah, he would have to have that tenderness that he didn't receive from that age range. But with a trusting female. And he said he did have a significant other who was willing to do that. And I told him, I wish I knew this third thing, and I just don't know what the third thing is. But that's part of maybe his mission to get it. I don't know, but he was very appreciative, and that just touched me, just because so many times it said I wanted to not say anything, but the pushing of, you know, source or whatever it is, and it's like you gotta keep yourself open to people. I find with human beings, it's so easy. It's not easy with nature, but it's easier than with human beings, because human beings are so complex and there's so many layers and there's so much stuff, and it's a beautiful thing, you know. So I get a lot of, like, even for Facebook, I don't know what algorithm I'm on, but I get almost like 100 friend requests a day from people all over the world, you know. And I have some friend requests that's like 3 years old, because it's like you would need a whole assistant to like go through, because I don't just accept, you know, I look through the profile. Are they healers? Are they taking care of their community? What sense of style? It's different for different people, but overall, are they harming society in some way, you know? And then it's like, okay, no, you know. But yeah, so it is like a tuning. Some of it is audible, a lot of it is visual, some of it is the spiritual thing, some of it's cosmic, a lot of it is spatial location, and maybe other things that we haven't formed language about, you know. And it does require me to have to be alone a lot, because too much information in all the time. And I live in a major city, and I live in a very popular area. So you kind of got to get ready to go out. And when I do, you have to also make sure that you eat healthy and very clean, as to not project, and as to be able to have a clear channel to receive, and have a refinement in order to offer it in a way that they can receive it, and a tenderness of, are they ready to receive, you know, just a gentleness of the beings.
Can you speak about the 20-day food cleanse? I know recently you and I had discussions on fasting and food, and it all seemed to come together just by coincidence that you and I were doing the same thing or similar things at the same time.
Yeah. So there's a word for what it is that I kind of believe in, and it's just so happened to be a word about it. It was already in my own soul, that the sun gives you everything that's necessary. And matter of fact, since you've been here for all existence, you don't even need that. So we go through different layers of, you know, what it takes to materialize into this human form, but you don't want to get stuck into just material. And there's ways to kind of come back out without a lot of barriers. So, you know, the sun offers pretty much everything. You don't even really need the water. And then if you decide that you're going to have the water, then, you know, years later, we wind up thinking, oh, this is a great thing to maybe digest when that wasn't necessary. And then we began to do that. And, oh, we're going to digest this fruit. No, I can digest that 100%. And then vegetables, 80%. Then we got down to meat and herbs and all this other stuff, you know. But our bodies isn't really required to have all of that stuff. It's kind of like having the mother's milk. Well, if mother's milk isn't available and all you have is sugar water, You know what I mean? Your body will adjust. Will it adjust in the best way possible? You know, not so much. It still needs some nutrients, but it can adapt. And so I think that the nutrients that we get from the sun is enough. And but because I've given myself meat for the first half of the, my life, and then mostly carbs for the next half to kind of feel that desire or whatever. I'm learning how to let go, and it takes time. But one of the best effects that I've had, I have a page on Facebook that's called 120 cleanse. It's like a cleansing page of like, here's my process. Because a few people seemed like they were interested in it. And I didn't realize there was going to be that many people who would be interested. So now it's like a lot of people I don't even know. And there's like 500 members, but there's more people than that who just looks at it and circulates with it. So it's called 120-day complete cleanse. And it's just a way of me being accountable to say, when I wake up, I do my meditations. These are the sounds that I listen to, or I want complete silence. I have complete silence. I'm doing these type of house chores. I'm reading these sorts of books to make sure that I have and to be fed in these particular ways spiritually. And then here's what I'm eating, and here's the ingredients that's within it, and it just keeps me accountable, and then other people just like, oh, I'm going to follow with it, or I'm going to have some sort of accountability within myself and for myself. And I just came off of one. The last day was March 11th, but the tail end of that, I didn't really post because I wound up doing this herbal cleanse where you don't take in any nutrients at all. You are pulling all the toxins out of your system. So the only thing that you can have, there's nothing that's edible as far as chewing, but you can take vegetables, definitely have parsley, and you can make a soup. You can't eat the vegetables out of the soup, but you can drink the liquid, but there's no salt. So a lot of times I just wasn't having that at all because it's like, I'm just drinking water, but the parsley is really necessary. So I didn't eat for 4 days, but I took in the herbs inside of the grape juice. And I also had the psyllium husk and the bentonite clay and those things that can still pull and draw out the toxins, and it can give you the fiber and all the things that's necessary. So you can do this in a healthy way. And then I took a gap in between because I decided to celebrate my birthday and all of that stuff. And then I came back to it and did another 7 days. But the effects of that was so tremendous, and it was so amazing. And so the alignment was even more aligned, and the clarity was even more clear, and it was an incredible experience. And so it was my trial, my test run to see if I can, the maximum days is 109 days of doing this. And what you're doing is you're cleaning out each organ, and you can't clean out the kidney until you clean out the liver. You can't clean out the liver until you clean out the pancreas, and so on and so forth. So it's going through that natural order of cleaning each organ out. And so I bought the products, and I'll be beginning soon, but I want to take a couple of weeks because, my daughter, we want to celebrate some things and do whatever. But by the end of this month, the beginning of next month, I'm going to begin the 109 days of that process, because your body's not digesting all of the time, and it can work and do all these other great things, since it's not constantly trying to break something down. With the nutrients, you're building something up, but it doesn't have to break down the nutrients and all of that. It can just flush out what was already there, all of the waste and the contaminants, and really the toxins. And the toxins that we're bringing into our body is because it's hiding some sort of trauma, maybe, or stress or stuff, And then we don't have to play in that world and in that field, right? We can just release those things and take the time necessary to release it, and then form healthier habits in that process, right? Because when I'm doing it, it's kind of like when I do the black seed oil, right? It's a no nonsense sort of thing. Like when I take that in, my mind is so clear and so focused, and I can't get on the couch and watch TV. I can't lay in the bed and, think about stuff in the past. Like I have to be on it, and like it just forces me to. It doesn't allow me to put that other part in my brain of it's just order, straight order. So I look around and just like, what else can I clean in the house? You know what I mean? Like all of my clothes is already folded. Everything is ironed for the entire week. These things is in order. I've already alphabetized all of this other stuff. You know what I mean? Now let's get to the homework. You know what I mean? So, and that was just for a couple of days. You know what I mean? So imagine 109 days of that, and to do it on purpose and have a sense of order and organization. And so that's what my mission is for the upcoming month. We're going to go, me and my daughter's going to go to Vegas at the end of this month. So it's going to start the first part of May. I'll begin that 109-day cleanse. So yeah, I mean, everything about cleanses, you know how it goes, but a lot of times we're attacking things, but we're not going to get to the source of it, right? And in order to get to the source of it, you have to let go of a lot of anything that comes in your body is either medicinal or nutritional. But if it's nutritional, you're also feeding the thing that's still there, the virus, the parasite, the worms. We got a ton of worms, and we got a lot of eggs, you know, that's continuously hatching in our body. And so the herbs go to killing those. And then you don't want to get stuck and hooked onto just herbs all the time either. You know, you can get it if you're just eating some very basic things. You'll be okay, and you won't need that stuff. But in order to do a deep cleanse, I want to go ahead and do this part of the process. But it's not something that I plan on doing continuously, you know, over time. You want your body gives you everything it already requires. Yeah, so.
Can you speak about the connections of energy between people, and in a creative art form, about people working together, learning together, inspiring each other, what the possibilities are?
The immediate thing that came to as a visual when you said this was mangoes and fruit. And how does that connect to what you're discussing? So wherever I'm at, like I have a company as well called imagine.com, and we do parties and events and stuff like that, which is weird because I've never been a party person or wanted to be in the center of things. But that's one of the things with Source. It's like, this is what you're going to do. And I'm like, really? Why are you doing this to me? And so it's like, okay, I'll do this. And so I remember being in the middle of this party at one of the major soccer events here in Chicago. And we didn't have a lot of people coming to the booth at that moment because the game was going on. And so we started talking about, I don't know if I had a mango on me, like a random mango, or if I had like some key limes in my pocket. And then we just kind of discussed. And I was saying how at home, I started bringing mangoes home, and I didn't know why, because it's harder to open. You know what I mean? It's harder to get the fruit. So just out of laziness, I didn't really eat them. So they would just sit on my table and look at me, and I would look at them. And this happened for about 6 months before. I mean, I would occasionally eat it, but sometimes I wouldn't, you know, but I would buy them, and they would just be here with me, hanging out. And then after about 6 months, it was just like, you know, hold me and walk around with me type of thing. And so I held the mango the whole day, and it's the flesh of it is just kind of almost like human, you know? And then it starts to develop the body temperature that you have, right? It's like, that's pretty amazing. And then I started seeing the form and the shape of it, and it looked like the human heart. It was like the size and the shaping of the heart. And I started reading about it. And then I would say after a couple of months of doing that, it was about a year after bringing mangoes home, I put it on my heart, and I laid down and fell asleep with it on my heart. And then I did that for a while, and I would get these really amazing experiences where the next day when I would go outside, kind of like the Truman Show, like you would go out and like all these people are just smiling at you in every direction, like everyone. And, you know, I tend to have a pretty okay spirit, I guess. but not to the point where I was getting that much attention of smiles. So people wasn't saying a lot, but everybody was just smiling at me. And it was so warm and inviting and weird and interesting. So I was like, what is this? So then I kept putting it on my heart. And then the next day I would come out and I would feel what they were feeling. And it was just this internal smile or internal shining inside of me. And I'm like, I was just so grateful and so appreciative. And I'm like, thank you, Mango, you know? But it helped me understand that you don't really have to eat the flesh of a thing in order to receive the benefits from it. And that tenderness began to, and it took years because I was working with that mango and I wasn't telling anybody anything. I was just experiencing this thing. Because like, how do you express that to someone, right? Without looking like you're a complete imbecile. Not that I was even too much thinking about that. I just was working with it on my own accord. You know what I mean? But when I did start speaking about it, I started getting various reactions. And then I was like, oh, let me see what this lime is gonna do. Oh, maybe I can bring a banana, you know? So now you're laying with all this fruit. And then I would have like cramping, really severe cramping or headaches, and I would put the mango on my head and it would clear up my headache. And I have the type of cramping that is severe. I would put the mango on that area of my body and it would take the pain away. And I was blown away by it. And in gratitude of it and just constantly thanking it. And I just so happened to talk to somebody in this soccer match place, you know, in this place where the soccer matches was happening and it's all this fun stuff happening around, but people began to huddle in a small circle talking about mangoes. So the woman I was talking to, she was like, that's really interesting. I think I might try it. But another woman who was all the way far away from us, she overheard it. She didn't say anything, but she went and she told her father because he had a pacemaker. And they were going to have to do another surgery. This was like the second or third surgery and changing out this pacemaker. And her dad was like, that sounds weird, but you're my daughter, I trust you, and I'm going to try it. And so he worked with that mango for 2 weeks. And he went back into the hospital. They were like, we don't know what happened or what you did, but you don't have to have surgery. Your pacemaker does not need to be changed. You're good. And it stayed continuously good for, I think, over a year. After talking to her, he still didn't need surgery. So when we're talking about interacting with people and creating, I think that we're always in a continuous stage of creating. The fact that we decided to show up in the same reality, because how many eons and eons of time that we could have been here. I could have came back as a slug, you know what I mean? Like, or a plant, you know what I mean? But we both decided to come here as these particular beings at this particular time. Like the chances of that is almost none at all, right? So there's a purpose. I don't know what it is per se, but we're constantly creating. So in creative spaces of making work and creating work, I just feel like being humans and talking about mangoes and placing mangoes on hearts and those type of things, like that's a creative process that I'm interested in. You know what I mean? Because when we're tackling, say, social justice and we're coming at it from this very, I don't know, it sometimes works out, sometimes not so much, you know, because a lot of these issues, I think, is within ourselves already. And they just show up outside of ourselves. But if we can operate with it in these very tender ways with operate with ourselves in these very tender ways and giving ourselves the nutritional value, it doesn't have to be an edible one, you know, then these other things begin to dissipate out of our reality the more that we give to ourselves in those ways, you know? So it's really an internal, I won't even say battle. It's really a curiosity. I almost think about let's think about plutonium or hydrogen. You know, like when these two things are near each other, this is what happens. And then we try to put a narrative on top of it and explain it. Well, no, some people just carry these particular things in our beings. You know what I mean? And we're just acting them out and we're trying to express it the best way that we can when this is just a natural order. And the more that I let go of the narrative, the more that I can see things for what it is. And it's really just like elements, you know? And so I don't really fall into the narrative of things, and so therefore a lot of the social interactions and placing blame, and it don't work, right? It doesn't work because when I start talking about these other things, they're like, wait, hold on, I had an aim and an agenda, and I wanted to go towards that aim and towards that agenda, and now I have to go back and look internally and go get some mangoes and some key limes and work it out, you know.
I love the mango, working with the mango. It feels so much like, it reminds me of when my kids are eating and how they hold the food, and almost like they have this they relate to the food in a different way than I do, and it triggers me because my conditioned mind is saying, you have to eat it, you have to take it and eat it, what you're doing is wrong. That's the feeling that comes out of me. But you explain it, you talking about this, about how the curiosity and allowing yourself to just go with it and let go of the judgment. And because of that, there's this expanse of your world seems just so much open to so many things, so many possibilities. So it's really nice to hear.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate, like, my heart appreciates that. I really do, because it's I do approach it in this very childlike way, all of life. I think that how you interact with a new thing, it's like some people operate it with anger, and I think anger is a tool, but it's not always a useful one, And we're usually taught that through family by watching them and how they're interacting or wanting to do the opposite or whatever. But I've always like approached things. I still got some of that human stuff, right? And I still work through it, but I mostly approach everything with this like, what's this new thing, you know? Um, and it is very, childlike. But I don't protect it and all that stuff, right? But I lead with that, I lead that way. And so all human beings is just like, it's like I'm meeting a whole nother planet. And I can explore it and take the time and the effort and the energy and when you approach them that way, something else turns on in them. So they'll always say to me, like, you're different, and I've never met anybody like you. Sometimes men will start off with, I never met another woman like you, and then they'll end with, I never met any being like you. And I'm like, but I meet them all the time. But I think it's because it draws that part of them out. And like I said, a lot of concepts I never let go of. They let go of when they were like around 7 or 8. I never let go of those things because they're too important. And it just helps you navigate this plane of existence so much more, and all of these other planes of existence. Because I've had so many other interactions with beings that live underwater and just all kind of stuff. But I mean, it would probably sound very weird. It doesn't happen often, but it has happened. And now I'm starting to see, oh, there's correlations between these things. I mean, even fears. I've had a couple fears before, and it was just like how I interacted with that was very similar to the way that I interacted with this thing that wasn't a fear at all. But I had an openness for each of them. And it was like, oh man, it started to dawn on me even just within the last week of like, I'll just say it because it's hard to imagine. One of these dreams was a portal, and I could see beings coming out of this light source area. Usually when I have a dream and there's a portal, there's one of two things. There's almost always water near it. Almost always a source of water. And then if it's inside of a home or something like that, it's in a closet of a room. I don't know why, but it's always in the roof of a closet inside of a room. Well, in this dream, it was neither. It was just green land, and it was like hilly, and it looked like it was near maybe Ireland or something. I don't know, but I didn't see water though. And it was like a light coming out of the ground, but it was like almost like electricity where you have it coming out of the ground, but also coming from the top down at the same time. And there was these beings flooding out, and it was going so fast. But in my dreams, I can see beings, but they can't see me always, right? Oh, these ones could see me. And matter of fact, they were coming out as full grown men in warrior clothing, kind of like ancient Japanese warrior kind of combat stuff. But it showed to me that these were Europeans, but they were in Japanese gear as full adults and warriors ready to fight. They didn't grow up. They didn't have no tenderness. It wasn't like a couple bottles and just the narrative that I understood about how we get here, you know? And the second thing that was most like really amazing was that they came and they pushed through their body, through the armor, and their face got to be really big. Like, I don't know how to explain it, kind of like the Omax heads. And they showed their face right in front of me and pulled back into their body where they were coming out of, and it was running, going east. And it was just happening fast, fast, fast. It was like 25 before I could like say, you should do something about this. And then it wasn't until 50 where I was like, shut it down. And then I shut it down. I stopped putting energy towards it, and then they stopped being produced. And then some other curious stuff happened in the dream. It had nothing in relation directly to that. Well, I guess it had to be some sort of relation, but it doesn't have the premise of what it is that I'm discussing. So, but their image came directly to my face to show in my face that their face acknowledged me, knew that I was there, and they were coming into this existence anyway. And I had fear surrounding that, you know, one, that it seemed like they're up to battle, and it seemed like it may be towards humanity overall. Two, that they had the boldness to show me their face, and it was a huge face, and that they had no fear. But maybe it had nothing to do with any of those things. I don't know. Maybe it's a combination of things throughout my existence that whatever, you know. But what was similar to that, to another thing that I had when I was a little girl, I had this experience when I was very young. We were near water, and there was some it was like swamp-like area, and there were some guys that was up at the top, and they were like colonizers. And I don't know if they were looking for runaway slaves or whatever, but they came over by the water, and they were looking down in the water, and I could see them, but they couldn't see me, right? And they couldn't see me, and then I turned the other way, and I seen, you know, like the stuff that's like in swamp-like water, right? And then there was this light that was a great light that I've never seen any before, but it was a whole kingdom down there. And it was these very tall beings that had to be like the height of a small building. Okay. And one of them was a young girl. Now, she was an ancient being that was so old that I can't even identify how old, but she appeared as though she was in her teenage years, even in the ancient timing. So she was looking at me, and I was looking at her. She's like, you can see me. And I didn't say any words, but I'm like, and you can see me, you know what I mean? But I didn't say the words out loud. And she was like, kind of exploring me, you know what I mean? And I'm exploring her in this incredible world down here that they're not breathing water. It's like a whole world inside of a world, right? And it's everywhere. It's everywhere. There's these existences that's right here on this plane of existence. Like, we don't go anywhere. It's not like we go to another land somewhere when we die. There is simultaneously happening in front of us. It's just, can we see? Are we invited to see these things happening? So there were some beings that came in a courtyard that was older, and I can sense that it was like her uncle, her father, her grandfather, like one of the leaders of that space. And he came out, and he was just as tall as she was, you know what I mean? And very bright. They were skinny and very tall. and I can almost draw it, but most things I can just, it's like a photographic memory and I can just draw it exactly. But with this, it was so much light surrounding it. An image to draw wouldn't even, it wouldn't come to some sort of realization that we know. But I think it's important maybe to still maybe draw it out. I don't know. But when he came out, I can tell that it was a protective stance of like, who are you? How are you able to see us? But he just read, he just read my body. He read my being. And he like scanned me, with his mind. And he was like, oh, she's fine, And he turned his back on me real quick, like, oh, okay, we're going to go back to doing whatever we're doing. And they went back into this room that I didn't go into because they gave the opening for me to come to see more. But I was just still standing there like, what is happening? Why do I see this? I was just in awe, really. But I always think about that because I'm like, I wish I would have went further. And I think I still may have the opportunity, but it was just like, what if I go in this room, in this space, and I can't come out? You know what I mean? But yeah, so last week or within the last couple of days, it showed me that both of these experiences was the same, which is here's a group of beings that is acknowledging my existence and I'm acknowledging their existence, and that I don't really have to put a lot of narrative on it. They felt very harmonic. Matter of fact, the word harmony within itself, that's what it looked like. Whereas these other beings had this warrior stance pose of like, we finna to like settle some shit. And right now, and you won't really be able to, it's a spiritual battle. You could tell they were spiritual beings in a spiritual battle. And, but I gave a narrative to it, but they both showed themselves to me, and I can do nothing but be an appreciation of that. And then the fear begins to dissipate a little bit about the warrior stuff. I mean, I guess in the times that we are, perhaps that's necessary. I don't know. The idea is really not to judge it so much. It's just to observe it. But yeah, so I'm open to it. Even things that I don't want to necessarily or say like, I'm still open to it, understanding it. And what if in this, I don't believe in unconsciousness, but what if in this subconscious way, I'm the one that's creating the dilemma and the problem and the issues, and I don't know how I am. And so I'm really interested in like finding that link and having that alignment of, when I'm eating this, I know that when I eat sugar or drink coffee, when I was doing Uber, I mean, immediately that next person would have an attitude and argumentative, and traffic would begin to, like some people would get in a car and it's almost like every green light would happen and we would get to their destination super fast, no traffic at all. And then 5 minutes later, you'll get a person in and it's every obstacle that there could be, you come into, And I started to realize, oh, this has a lot to do with not only who's in the car with me, and this is the journey that they're choosing, and I'm just saying, okay, I'm going to take you, but how we get there is really up to you. But it also has to do with what I'm putting in my body of who wind up getting in the car, because as soon as I have the sugar, this is what happens, so, or the caffeine, so I think it's all really, again, the word malleable keep coming up, but it's interconnected for sure. And it's a very thin, wiry thing. Like it's I don't know how to explain it, but it's a whole nother field of material that we can't say is material per se, right? It's ephemeral, I guess you could say. Maybe that's the word for it. And I don't know. Yeah, still working it out. still understanding it and appreciating it and loving being around children, because I know that they're our elders. They have to fix all of our wrongs, so they have to be a wiser breed than we are. And they are the medicines in our family that we are seeking. And it's kind of like when you're growing in the neighborhood that you're in, well, we call them weeds, but it's picking up on what we really need as a community, and it grows that. And then, you know, we put pesticide on it and we kill it and we say, oh, that doesn't look pretty, you know, when it's really the exact medicine, almost to the degree that we need, that we require, because nature is always giving us that. Is continuously giving to us of that way. And I attempt to do that when with people, but some people have to, you know, they're not ready to receive. They may be 32% ready, you know what I mean? Percentages of being open to. And you just give accordingly and then learn how to receive. That's one thing it's a very huge challenge for me, is learning how to receive. How to receive from human beings, how to receive from nature, yes, but how to receive from human beings. And I think that the more that I learn to receive from human beings, the greater I receive from nature. So it's just an ongoing thing.
It seems that part of that being ready to receive is happening also in that realm of that unknown or unseen space. For me, it seems to be a physical sort of energetic quality. Like, for example, for this conversation, I noticed last night there was a lot of energetic movements happening, and I was curious as to why, but I think it was part of that, you know, just a theory, a preparation to receive in this conversation.
Mm.
And also that the you mentioned the importance of not judging, and it's yeah, that I think that's an important one. Like the feeling of listening to you, the image that comes to mind, or what I feel is like, and I use this idea a lot because it kind of explains a lot of my process. It's like hanging on the edge of a cliff for dear life, and then you're smiling at the top of the cliff while I'm hanging on, and you're taking one finger at a time to let you know, so that I let go of the cliff and kind of trust. But and as I let go and I'm falling, you're at the bottom holding the net as well, and that's played like in a loop, like over and over and over. This letting go, this sort of trusting, and then you know, this trust in this curiosity, and and this letting go, and you know, this sort of process, which is difficult for me, you know, to be able to do that. So
It's interesting that you say that, because I was having headaches before this, and I'm like, I know that this has to do with, you know, coming on and speaking. I thought it was just going to be me and you, and to have two other people, I think I would have had even more trepidation. So I'm glad it happened the way that this just happened. But um, it that's my life. You just explained it perfectly, and it's beautiful though, because Source has always got my back. Like, it always showcases to me that, think about a computer, and I'm looking at my computer right now. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, probably 20 tabs open, right? But they had the little minus on it, right? So when I'm ready to open it back up and see that full page of it, I can, but it's all there. And I feel like that's the way it is with the universe, right? They say that this is the 5th time that the universe has grown and imploded upon itself, and then grown back out and imploded back on itself, and so on and so forth. But all of that data, all of that information, all of that knowledge is at our fingertips at all times. And we can decide to maximize or minimize the page that we want to see in front of us at that time and what's going to be appropriate for this moment at this particular time. But if we've always been in existence and we're going to always be in existence, yeah, fear could be a tool, but it's not always the best tool when exploring and investigating, and which is 99% of our life, you know, because we're going to always be okay. You know, we've always been okay, and we're going to always be okay. Let's just say existence leave for 3,000 years. Well, you know, we're going to be inside of the soil and inside of the rocks and the minerals, and then that water is going to crash against it, and you're going to develop some other, you know, it's going to continuously develop itself. And it has always done it, and it's going to always do it. So why identify with any one particular stage so heavy and so securely? Because if we're doing that, then we can't be all of the other things too, you know? So I allow myself to blend in, because that's where I remember coming in. I faded into this reality, you know, that we call this here and now, and the social construction and understanding tones to be a voice, and that voice to have a command, and that command to be regulated by how you move and navigate, right? So I faded into that understanding. It wasn't something that just happened. I mean, my grandmother and my aunt says that I began to talk clear sentences and able to respond clearly at the age of 4 months. My mother says 2 months, but I think it's more 4 months. And they were afraid. Well, my grandmother was afraid of that. So she threw me across the table to my aunt, and my aunt kind of nurtured me until I was 7. But they said I didn't speak again until I was 5. And I remember not speaking, but on purpose, because it was like, you're not ready, you know. You have to give it to them when they're ready to receive, because if you do it any other way, it's like kind of giving too much sunlight to a small fern. You know, some you know, older plants can take in that much, and some of them can't, and you don't have a judgment to that, you know. Just be okay with the nature of what it is. But it also allowed me to meditate a lot, because I didn't speak until I was 5 again. So I was able to stay into like the internal composition of myself and the material of life and the world. I understood the importance of speech, the importance of words, what was gonna be said, how it should be said, how it's gonna be received. The fact that I could hear conversations happening in their mind without them actually saying it out loud, and me responding to them in my mind. And I'm like, if we can have these kind of conversations, then you can hear, I'm like, I can hear you the whole conversation. Why can't you hear me? You know what I'm saying? So, and then they'll look at me at that time, and I'm like, oh, you can hear me. You're just deciding to not. And I didn't understand why, you know? And then I started to get it's not socially acceptable to allow telepathy to just be what it is, and to honor that. You know, it was Christian centered, and that's a bad thing, you know? And it must be the devil sort of thing, you know? So that was really interesting. And it continues to be interesting, because I think that the beings, before they even get in my car, I'm realizing who they are before they come. And to not touch it too much, because I don't want to make it work in the way that I want it to work. If I don't want even to want anything, you know what I mean? Just to allow it to be what it is, and that I know that I'm always okay. And whenever I'm in an illusion that I'm not, what is this illusion, and how did it form? And why is it here? Oh, it was to secure me, but it's been paralyzing me and not securing me at all.
I think we'll leave it there for today. I would like to say thank you for Sierra for sharing today. Just to listen and to hear what's been said has been beautiful. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. And thank you for the presence of both of you. And now I'm very curious to know what sort of work you do. I'm going to go to your pages and I'm going to go through them all and enjoy that. And just deep gratitude to say thank you for showing up in this point of existence at the same time. And I'm ready. I don't know what for, but I'm ready.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So thank you, Annie.
Grand Rising, and thank you guys. Thank you, Sierra, for sharing, and Ade and Ron. Thank you.
Thank you, Ade.
Thank you, everyone. Sierra, thank you. It was nice meeting you. And it was really a pleasure listening to you. And I enjoyed it very much.
And again, thank you, Sierra. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I think, Sierra, there's space for a second conversation, if that's okay with you at some point.
Very good. Just let me know and I'm always available to you.
Thank you very much. So thank you for listening to Raan Oosha's Conversation on Art with today's guest, Sierra Adams, and goodbye.